My name is Laura Bennett. I'm 20 years old and currently a sophomore majoring in political science at the University of Oregon. When I drove 5 hours back to my hometown of Medford for spring break, I never imagined that the moment I stepped out of my car would be the moment my world came crashing down. Right in front of me, the house I grew up in stood hollow and empty. A bold "for sale" sign planted in the middle of the front lawn announced the truth like a slap in the face. The curtains were gone. No car in the garage, no lights, no sounds. I thought I had the wrong address, until I noticed the street lamp with the crack I once tripped over in elementary school. Everything was in the exact same place I used to call home, except it wasn't mine anymore. 3 black trash bags sat squarely on the front steps. I staggered up the porch, head spinning. My trembling hands untied one of the bags. Inside were the red sweater my mom gave me last winter, a few textbooks, and a cracked photo frame showing me standing between my parents at my high school graduation. I called my mom. No answer. I tried my dad. After 3 rings, he picked up. I'm standing in front of the house. Where is everything? What is going on, Dad? His voice was flat, emotionless. We moved. Don't make a big deal. Figure it out yourself. Wait, what are you saying? You moved without telling me? You're an adult now, handle it. Before I could say anything else, he hung up. The cold click from the other end hit me harder than any words could. I called again. Busy. Then it went straight to voicemail. I tried my sister. No answer. In disbelief, I dialed again. A 3rd time, a 4th, but there was only silence. I stood frozen as the light of the afternoon began to fade. The wind whispered through the bare branches in the front yard, where my sister and I used to hang Christmas lights every year. Everything suddenly felt unfamiliar, like a half-forgotten dream I never wanted to revisit. One question echoed in my mind. Did they ever really consider me part of the family? I didn't cry. I couldn't. Not because I was strong, but because everything had happened so fast that even my emotions couldn't catch up. I gathered each heavy trash bag and stuffed them into my car trunk, as if I were collecting the shattered remnants of a life I no longer belonged to. That night, I stayed at a roadside motel. The bed creaked with every move, and the thin blanket felt colder than the silence I'd been left in. I unpacked what I could: some notebooks, a few winter clothes, an old laptop, and a small journal with a bent cover. No letter, no note, not even a scrap of explanation. Only silence. And 3 trash bags. I stared at the ceiling, wondering, if I had been reckless, irresponsible, I might have understood. But I was the one who sent part of my paycheck home every month. I never asked for anything. I tried every day to be someone they could be proud of. And yet, this was what I got. Abandoned, as if I never mattered. I unlocked my phone and scrolled through my last messages with my mom. The most recent one was from 2 weeks ago. Don't forget your coat. It's cold out. No warning, no clue. That was when I understood. If they chose to erase me from their lives, I'd do the same. Not out of hatred, but by walking a path they'd never be part of again. I opened my laptop and created a new folder, named it New Beginning. Lying on that motel bed, soft yellow light from the bedside lamp casting blurred shapes on the ceiling, I couldn't sleep. Memories surfaced like bubbles in water, moments I used to treasure as proof I had a home to return to. I was always the safe child, never loud, never demanding. While my classmates went out on weekends, I stayed in to study. When parties happened in the dorm, I worked extra shifts at the library. Every time I received scholarship aid, I wired some home to Mom. Sometimes $50, 0 cents. More if I earned extra at the campus cafe. It never felt like a duty. I just wanted to help, to be seen. But in our house, the one who got protected was not me. It was my younger brother, Kyle. Kyle is 3 years younger. He struggled academically, changed schools 3 times in 2 years for being a bad fit. He was once caught smoking behind the high school, and even shattered a neighbor's window during an argument. Yet every time something happened, Mom rushed to his defense. He's just a kid. He doesn't know better. Boys are impulsive sometimes. At least he doesn't run away like some kids do. And me? I never ran away. But I was the one left behind. Once, in 11th grade, I won second place in a statewide essay contest and was invited to be honored at the school board meeting. I was so excited I invited the whole family. That night, Dad said Kyle had a stomachache. No one came. I stood on stage alone, hands cold, eyes trying not to scan the empty chairs. Kyle once got suspended for spray painting "No More Lies" on a school wall. Dad met with the principal, came home angry, but still gave him a motorbike for his 17th birthday. Me? I got a $20.00 gift card. It was never about the money. I just wanted fairness. But in our house, silence, obedience, and sacrifice seemed to be the easiest things to forget. Now I don't have to wonder anymore. They made it clear with their actions. They threw me out, along with 3 trash bags. I scrolled down old texts with Kyle. The last one I sent was, "Don't stay up gaming too late, finals are coming." His last message? A thumbs up emoji. Sent almost 4 months ago. Looking back now, I find it absurd. They had arranged everything behind my back. Selling the house, moving out, without a word, without a trace of remorse. I used to think that if I worked harder, was kinder, helped more, they'd love me like they always embraced Kyle after every mess. But maybe I was wrong all along. Maybe to them, I was always just a shadow next to their golden boy. I remembered something one of my professors once said. Family isn't just where you grow up, it's where you learn to survive. Sometimes, through the very pain they leave you with. I looked out the window. The suburban night sky was still. No one knocking on my door, no one asking if I'd eaten. The only thing I had left was myself, and the undeniable truth. I couldn't go back. I opened my laptop, logged into my student email. At the top of my inbox was a message from my advisor. "Laura, call me if you need a place to stay over break." My fingers hovered briefly, then typed a simple reply. "I'd really appreciate it if I could stay over. I truly need a safe place right now." Sent. At that moment, I didn't know what was coming next. But I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer the Laura who stood abandoned on the porch beside 3 trash bags. I was someone moving forward, even if no one was walking with me. 3 hours later, I received a reply from Professor Keller, my public policy professor last semester. She had those sharp, observant eyes, but a voice so unexpectedly gentle it always made students feel heard, no matter how silly their questions were. "You can come over tonight. Address is below. The guest room's always ready." That was all it said. No questions, no explanations, and maybe that's exactly why it hit me so hard. I didn't know when someone like Professor Keller, a virtual stranger, had become the first person to offer me a place to rest, while my own family had vanished without a trace. Her house sat on the edge of Eugene, tucked inside a quiet neighborhood lined with maple trees already turning red. It was a tidy 2-story home filled with books, warm light, and the smell of something baking. She put me up in an attic room with a window that looked out over the backyard. There were no probing questions, no pity. She just handed me a mug of hot tea and said, "You don't have to tell me anything unless you want to. You can stay as long as you need, but if you plan on sitting around too long, I'll make you do the dishes." I laughed. After days of holding myself together just to keep from falling apart, I finally laughed. And like a dam breaking, I sat down at the kitchen table and told her everything. From the empty lawn, to the 3 trash bags, the cold phone call, and the hollow frame of what used to be my bedroom window. She didn't say much, but when I finished, she gently placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "They can take the house, but they can't take your worth." The next morning, while I was straightening up the living room, Professor Keller came downstairs with a printed email in her hand. I just got this from a nonprofit called Fair Living Coalition. They're looking for summer interns to work on housing rights and community inequality. I think you should apply. I took the flyer and scanned the details. The program offered students a chance to research and work directly on cases involving illegal evictions, housing discrimination, and rental issues in low-income neighborhoods. My heart stirred. There was something deeply real in those lines of text, a feeling that maybe I wasn't alone, that I wasn't just someone pushed out of a home, but maybe I could help others avoid the same fate. I submitted my application that same day. A week later, I got an interview invitation from the program coordinator, Mrs. Elaine Rhodes. She was in her 50s, with a raspy but steady voice and eyes that held yours like every word you spoke mattered. She asked me a lot: why I chose this major, what drew me to housing issues, and finally, the most personal question of all. Laura, what makes you care about rental fairness? I sat there for a long moment. I had prepared a professional answer, something like, I'm interested in community rights. But in the end, I just told the truth. Because I know what it feels like to be left behind, to be treated like you don't exist in a home that used to be yours. I don't want anyone else to go through that. She didn't reply right away, just nodded. 3 days later, I got the official offer. I had been selected. The program started in May, but Elaine let me join early for some smaller projects. I was assigned to work with a team of attorneys who helped tenants being forced out of their homes before their leases ended, especially students and immigrant workers. In our first team meeting, I sat next to a woman named Mariah, a former law student who had lost her own housing in a fraudulent lease case. She smiled at me and whispered, "Welcome to where the people who got pushed out start over." That night, back in my attic room at Professor Keller's, I opened my laptop and created a new folder next to New Beginning. I named this one Reason, because now I had one. And for the first time in weeks, I felt grateful I'd been forced out of that so-called home. Because if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here. I never imagined an internship could alter the course of my life. But those afternoons spent in the cramped office of the Fair Living Coalition, listening to people share how they'd been evicted despite active leases or had their rent doubled without notice, made it impossible to look away. There was a nursing student named Natalie, forced out of her dorm for working night shifts, mistaken for sneaking in strangers. A black student named Marcus denied a rental after meeting the landlord despite a flawless application. A single mom with 3 kids living in her car for 3 weeks after reporting mold in her apartment. The more I listened, the more a storm of emotions brewed in me: anger, empathy, a burning sense of purpose. I knew these weren't just stats in a report. They were invisible scars left by a system that failed the innocent. One night, while sorting case files in Keller's living room, I looked at the towering stack and wondered, why isn't there a place just for students like me? People who don't even know where to begin when housing issues hit. That's where the idea began. At first, just a scribble on a sticky note, a safe space for students, for low-income workers, for anyone without a voice. Then it grew with every story I heard, every face I met. I pitched it to Elaine. She paused, then said, "Don't just make it a paper, make it real." Elaine connected me with a university fund program, the Community Impact Fellowship. If selected, I'd receive $25,000, 0 cents, to develop a project with meaningful social impact. The deadline? 17 days away. I had no clue where to start, but I knew what I wanted. I called the project Haven Link, a network where students, single-parent families, and low-wage workers could access basic legal support, housing rights info, and connections to local aid. A place to ask, what do I do now? And actually get an answer. Free, fast, and without judgment. Professor Keller helped polish every word of my proposal. Elaine introduced me to a community lawyer who taught me how to add legal triage tools into HavenLink's response system. A classmate from my communications course helped me design a simple logo and website. Every little piece clicked into place, like the world was quietly nudging me forward. The night I submitted the application, I hit send with sweaty palms. Not from fear of failure, but because I'd never poured my heart into anything so fully. 3 weeks later, the acceptance email arrived at 5 a.m. I woke up to the soft buzz of my phone and read the bold line, "Congratulations, you've been awarded this year's Community Impact Fellowship with $25,000, 0 cents, in funding." I stared at the screen in disbelief. Then, suddenly, I cried. Not for the money, but because for the first time, what I carried inside, what had always felt too personal, too small, was seen, was trusted, was supported. That afternoon, I went to the coalition's office to tell Elaine the news. She just smiled and handed me a thick envelope. "I think you should start with this. Org name, list of students who've faced housing trouble, contacts for past volunteers, and a promise. I'm with you." I hugged her tight. That same evening, I logged into the university site and posted our first announcement. HeavenLink, a place to begin again. We're here to help you hold on to your home. I didn't know how far the project would go, but I knew my journey wasn't about revenge or proving anything to the past. 6 months after I left that empty house with 3 trash bags, HavenLink had grown faster than I imagined. Our makeshift office, once an old study room in the West Dorms, was now fully booked each week. We had 3 regular volunteers, a law student holding Wednesday office hours, and even an online forum where renters could share stories and find help. I was so busy I sometimes forgot lunch, but never once felt drained. In fact, I felt alive, with a purpose. Then one October afternoon, while finishing up a grant report, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The area code. Medford. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. A minute later, the notification popped up. I played it. "Laura, it's Mom. I don't know where to begin, but are you okay? We need to talk." I set the phone down, heart pounding. Unsure if it was confusion or something deeper I'd locked away for half a year. Within the hour, 3 more calls came in. One from Dad, one from Kyle, one from a landline I recognized, Grandma's. The same Grandma who once told me, "You'll always be welcome at my house, no matter what." I didn't answer. I didn't reply to the texts that followed. Over the next 3 days, the calls kept coming. Sometimes it was Dad's voice, stern, clipped, cold. "Call back. We're family, Laura. You can't just ignore everyone." Sometimes it was Mom, her voice shaky. "Just let me know you're okay. I won't ask anything else." Even Kyle left a message. "Laura, I don't really know what's going on, but we miss you, we really do." I listened to every word, every voice. Not one of them said they were sorry. No one mentioned what they had done. No one spoke of the 3 trash bags, of the house, of how I'd had to ask a professor for shelter and start over from nothing. They called as if we'd simply lost touch, as if this was just a misunderstanding, not a deliberate, cold decision they made. I waited, hoping someone, just once, would say, "We were wrong." But no, all they said was, "Call us back." Not because they understood, but because they wanted me to go back to who I was. The daughter who always stayed quiet, always forgave, always made everything okay again. I used to be that girl. But not anymore. One evening, as I was preparing a training session for the new group of student volunteers, Elaine walked into the office holding an envelope. "Laura, this came to the HavenLink office. No sender name, just your name and a postmark from Medford." I took it and slowly opened it. Inside was an old photograph. Me, standing between my parents and Kyle, in front of the Christmas tree the year I turned 12. A small card was tucked in with it, bearing only one sentence. "Remember to come home." No signature, no address, no apology. I stared at the photo for a long time, then gently placed it in a drawer and locked it. Not because I was angry, but because I no longer expected anything from people who couldn't acknowledge their own mistakes. That night, I sat down to write HavenLink's first blog post. I didn't mention my name or tell any details. I simply wrote. Some homes aren't taken away by paperwork or legal rulings, but by silence, neglect, and the refusal to take responsibility. Yet, from those same voids, we can build new places of safety, where you are heard, respected, and allowed to begin again, on your own terms. When I hit publish, I felt a small weight lift from my chest. I haven't forgiven, and maybe I never will, but I'm no longer bound. Not by calls, not by photos, not by memories. The only thing I'm bound to now is the one truth I believe in. No one deserves to be treated as invisible in their own story. And I will do everything I can so that from now on, those who've been pushed aside can write their first new chapter too. On a quiet afternoon in early November, as I was reviewing a file for an international student who'd been told to vacate her apartment over unidentifiable noise, the Havenlink phone rang. As always, I answered in my practiced voice. Havenlink, this is Laura speaking. There was a pause, then a hesitant female voice on the line. Laura, this is Helen. I used to live next door to your family in Medford. I'm not sure if you remember me. I froze. Helen. The silver-haired lady who always brought over baked goods during the holidays. The one who used to warn me about slipping when the snow piled high. Of course I remember. Is everything okay? Oh, I don't want to bother you, but this morning I received a forwarded envelope addressed to you. It came to your old house. It looked kind of important. Sent to the old address. Do you know who it's from? A law firm, I believe. Something from New Mexico. I didn't open it, but if you'd like I can read a few lines from the outside. It looks like it might be about an inheritance. I nearly dropped my pen. A law firm? Inheritance? In New Mexico? My thoughts raced as Helen read out the return address. The sender was Cruz and Moreno Legal Associates. I asked her to hold on to the letters safely and immediately looked them up. Their website popped up instantly, with a contact number in the top right corner. Within 10 minutes, I was connected to an attorney named Benjamin Cruz. He confirmed that their office had sent a notice regarding an inheritance to my last known legal residence on file, which, according to their records from last year, was still my childhood home. Inheritance from whom? I asked, my voice tight. From your grandmother. Maria Delgado. She passed away last year and left behind a parcel of land in Santa Fe that was purchased by the local government for expansion of an eco-tourism district. Your share amounts to $412,000, 0 cents, currently held in a transfer fund pending beneficiary confirmation. I went silent. I remembered Maria, her calloused hands always wrapping tamales for me every winter, the letters she wrote in simple Spanish, even though I barely understood them as a child. She lived so humbly. How could she have left behind something worth that much? Benjamin seemed to anticipate my thoughts. The land was once of little value, but 3 years ago, the city approved development of a luxury resort nearby. The land value surged. Her plot was reassessed and purchased at that amount. You're the sole legal beneficiary, as specified clearly in her will. I could barely breathe. Then why am I only hearing about this now? A brief pause. The first notice, according to our files, was sent to your parents, who were listed as your legal guardians at the time since you were still a minor. My heart pounded in my chest. I hung up, and one thought echoed loud and clear. They knew. They had known all along. And then everything came back to me. The timing of when I was abandoned, which coincided with the payout period of the inheritance, the hurried sale of the house, the abrupt move, the vague, inviting messages afterward. Not one of them included an apology. Not because they missed me, but because they were afraid I'd find out. That night, I sat alone in the Havenlink office as the streetlights outside cast golden reflections on my desk. I pulled out the family photo again, the one I hadn't been able to destroy before, because a part of me still hoped some of the past had been real. This time, I tore it in half. Not out of rage, but because I finally understood. Some things are no longer worth holding on to. 3 days later, I received an email from the law firm confirming that the transfer was underway. All I had to do was sign $412,000, 0 cents, a number that slashed straight through the truth I'd been avoiding for so long. I didn't tell anyone. Not Elaine, not Professor Keller, not the student team at Havenlink. I needed time. Not to decide what to do with the money, but to face the real question. If the reason I was abandoned was money, was there ever anything real in our so-called love? Less than 2 weeks after I got the inheritance confirmation, I received another email, this time from the Watkins Social Impact Fund. The subject line made my heart stop for a second. Havenlink selected for final presentation round, eligible for $300,000, 0 cents, over 3 years. I read it over and over, terrified I was imagining it. A grant from the Watkins Fund wasn't just about the money. It was a formal endorsement from the largest nonprofit network in the Western U.S. If successful, Havenlink could hire staff, expand to 2 nearby universities, and build a solid digital platform for student support statewide. I didn't tell anyone about the strange timing, the grant email arriving just 3 days after I uncovered my parents' silence about the inheritance. But something inside me quietly shifted, as if the universe had brought me to the exact crossroads where I needed to make a clear choice. On presentation day, I woke at 5 a.m., hands trembling as I buttoned my crisp white shirt. I wore a simple navy suit, hair pulled back, barely any makeup. Clean lines were the only way I could keep my emotions at bay. Elaine picked me up from Keller's house, where I was still staying while we prepared to move offices. She looked at me with quiet understanding and gently squeezed my shoulder as we walked into the conference center. The main hall of the Watkins Foundation gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers. In front of us sat 8 board members, activists, business leaders, scholars, and 2 representatives from the state government. The room was serious, but not unfriendly. I opened my presentation with a story. Not mine, but Chloe's. A freshman forced out of her dorm for refusing to pay an extra $500, 0 cents reservation fee her landlord had made up. I explained how Havenlink helped her renegotiate, stay housed, and brought the issue to light through student media. Every word I spoke wasn't just information, it was a vow. In the middle of outlining our expansion model, the door to the boardroom cracked open. A staff member stepped in, whispered to Chairman Raymond, then turned to me. "Apologies for the interruption, Ms. Bennett," he said, calm and courteous. "There are people in the lobby saying they're your family. They're asking to speak with you before you finish." The room went silent. Elaine looked at me, not with concern, but with total faith that I'd know what to do. I took a deep breath. "Thank you, sir, but I'd prefer to continue. I'm here today not to resolve personal matters, but to speak for the community Havenlink represents." Mr. Raymond nodded. "Understood. Please continue." I turned back to the screen, pointer in hand, voice steady. Behind me stood an entire team that had poured their hearts into this mission. In front of me was a chance to create real change. I wouldn't let the past interrupt my present. Not this time. When the presentation ended, the board asked a series of questions, from financial sustainability to outreach strategy. I answered everyone with confidence. Elaine and I had rehearsed for this moment for weeks. As Mr. Raymond thanked me and said the final decision would be announced in 2 weeks, I bowed my head slightly, already feeling a quiet release in my chest. I walked out of the meeting room and saw them immediately. Mom, Dad, and Kyle were sitting on the sofa in the lobby. Mom stood up when she saw me, her face a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Dad had his arms crossed, his eyes betraying the tension. Kyle was looking down at the floor, not saying a word. Mom took a step forward, speaking softly. "Laura, I know you're busy, but please, hear us out." And I didn't step back. But I didn't move forward either. "Not now," I replied calmly. I just finished the most important step of my life. I won't let it be tarnished by anything that hasn't been made clear. Mom bit her lip. Dad tightened his fists. Kyle took a step back. If we're going to talk, I continued, let's start with the truth, not with emotions, not with old photos or vague messages, but the truth. I didn't wait for them to respond. I turned and walked away with Elaine, leaving behind the people who had chosen to discard me without any explanation. This time, I chose to move forward. Not because they no longer mattered, but because I had finally learned the most important lesson. I can be myself, even without them by my side. 2 days after the Watkins Foundation presentation, I received a message from Kyle. Can you give us an hour? I know you have no reason to agree. But please. I read the message over and over. Not because I was moved, but because for the first time in nearly a year, someone in my family was speaking to me without ordering, blaming, or placing fault. I agreed. With one condition. We would meet in a public place, briefly, and with no beating around the bush. I chose a small cafe near downtown, the place I often worked when Havenlink needed quiet for report writing. Inside, the lighting was soft and the scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, a stark contrast to the underlying tension waiting for me at the corner table. Mom sat with her back to the window, gripping her cappuccino like it was the last thing holding her together. Dad sat across from her, looking thinner than I remembered. Kyle sat between them, but leaning slightly toward Mom. I pulled out a chair and sat down, keeping a respectful distance. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then Mom finally spoke, her voice hoarse. Thank you for coming, Laura. I gave a slight nod. I know. You don't owe us anything. But there are a few things, if you'll allow me, that I want to make clear. I looked her directly in the eye. Tell the truth. Not what you think I want to hear, but the truth. Mom swallowed hard. Dad remained silent, but his eyes flickered for a moment. We're panicked. Dad lost his job, the house was being foreclosed, credit card debt. It all seemed to fall apart at once. I didn't know how to tell you. We always tried to keep face, especially in front of you. Our child, who was always so capable, always doing the right thing. I remained silent. Then, the inheritance notice came. They sent it to the old address. They said the property would be transferred to you when you turned 21. I didn't know what to do. I asked bluntly. Or did you and Dad decide to just hide it? Dad winced slightly. Mom paused, then nodded. At that time, we really needed the money. We thought if we moved out, if we kept a distance, it would be easier to handle everything. I leaned both hands on the table, keeping my voice steady. You said handle. Do you mean selling the house, throwing my things in trash bags, moving out with no goodbye, and staying silent while I searched for answers? Is that how you handle having a daughter? No one said anything. The only sound was the spoon stirring quietly in Kyle's coffee. I lowered my voice, but every word felt like a knife. I didn't come here to forgive. I didn't come here to hear an explanation. I came because I wanted to say one thing clearly. I don't need closure. I've already had it, on my own. I turned to Kyle. You're the only one in the family who reached out to me with kindness. You don't have to choose sides, just live more honestly than I ever could at your age. Kyle lowered his head. I didn't blame him. He's young. He can still be different from them. Finally, Dad spoke, his voice dry. You've always seen yourself as the victim, Laura. But do you know what we've had to sacrifice? I chuckled softly, not out of satisfaction, but because I was so used to this tone by now. If you think I'm the victim, then you've never understood me. I'm the survivor, the one who rebuilt from the wreckage that you and Mom created. I stood up, pulled out my wallet, and left enough money for the 3 coffees. I don't need you to apologize. But if you really want to make up for it, the only way is respect my boundaries. No more calls, no more vague texts, no more surprise visits. I'm not the little girl I used to be. I turned and walked out, not looking back. No tears, no anger, just finality. Outside the cafe, the December wind brushed past my coat. I took a deep breath, then pulled out my phone. A new message from the Watkins Foundation appeared. Congratulations! Havenlink has been selected for the final round, nominated for a $300,000 0 cents grant over 3 years. I laughed, but this time it was a real smile. There was no more random luck. Everything was the result of my choice to stand up, even if it had to be alone. 3 weeks after our final meeting at the cafe, I received the official email from the Watkins Foundation. Havenlink had been awarded the full $300,000 0 cents 3-year grant, plus an additional $50 0 cents in operational funding for the first year. I read the announcement while standing in the new office, a modest but bright space in a community support complex near downtown Eugene. The scent of fresh paint still lingered in the air. On the desk were piles of files for cases waiting for advice. In the hallway, 2 student volunteers were laughing as they set up chairs for a weekend legal training class. I looked at the scene, and for the first time I felt that I had truly built something bigger than myself. The very next week, a reporter from the Oregon PBS station reached out. They wanted to do a feature story on student-led social initiatives. The content director, Maya Stone, said that the story of Havenlink has the impact we're looking for. I hesitated for a moment, but Elaine nodded. If you don't tell your story, someone else will tell it their way. The filming took 2 days. They shot at the office, the community classes, and during a legal consultation where I was talking to a young couple being forced to sign an unfair lease. Maya was very skilled. She didn't push me into emotional corners, but she didn't let me avoid questions about the motivation behind what I do either. At the end of the segment, she asked, if you could go back to that day, standing in front of the empty house and the 3 trash bags, what would you say to yourself? I thought for a long time. Then I said, I'd say, don't focus on what you've lost, focus on what the pain will teach you to build. The program aired on Sunday evening. I didn't watch it live on TV. Instead, I sat alone in the Havenlink office, responding to every thank you note and partnership offer that had come in from community organizations across the state after the broadcast. On social media, the hashtag Havenlink spread quickly. Some former students shared stories of being unfairly evicted. A single mom messaged to say that after hearing my interview, she'd decided to file an official complaint instead of walking away in silence. Not long after, a representative from a community investment fund invited me to speak at a national youth leadership forum. And then, silence. No texts, no calls, not a single word from my family. No one acknowledged the TV segment. No one sent congratulations, no questions, no late apologies. At first, I thought I might feel hurt, but in truth, the only thing I felt was release. I realized I didn't need their validation anymore. I didn't need them to come back, and I no longer had anything to prove to people who had once chosen to walk away. One late afternoon, as I stood by the office window looking out into the distance, Elaine walked in. She gently placed a sheet of paper on the desk. It was her request for temporary leave. I'll be going to Belgium for 2 months to take care of my mother, but before I go, I have one question for you. I turned around. What are you planning to do next? I looked at her, then at the big board on the wall filled with upcoming initiatives, from building a mobile legal aid center to partnering with the university to include housing rights and student orientation. I smiled. I'm going to do what Havenlink was born to do. Keep a roof over the heads of those who no longer have a place to return to. Elaine nodded, her eyes full of trust. That evening, I returned to my small apartment near Alton Baker Park, sitting at my old wooden table with a warm cup of tea. Outside, the streetlights cast a soft glow through the window. I opened my phone and looked at my contact list, where my mom, dad, and Kyle's names were still saved. But this time, I didn't delete them. And I didn't call. I simply tapped the mute icon next to each contact. It wasn't avoidance. It was a choice. I chose to keep my peace, my clarity, and the quiet strength I had earned through the months I walked alone but never gave up. Because sometimes family isn't where you come from. It's where you learn to stand and build the home you always wished you'd had. By February, as spring began brushing the bare branches outside the Havenlink office windows, I sat in our small meeting room, preparing for the first roundtable with new partners. Outside, the volunteer team was setting up an intake table for students from a nearby university. Inside, I was finalizing the plan to open our second branch in Salem, where immigrant student rates are high and legal support is scarce. My life now consisted of reports, the quiet smiles of tenants who got to stay in their homes, and afternoons rushing from one office to the next. Strangely, I didn't feel drained. On the contrary, I had never felt more whole. One Friday afternoon, Professor Keller stopped by the office with a bag of homemade cookies and a few old newspapers. I saw this article on Havenlink in Voices for Justice magazine. I saved a copy to give to you. I opened the cover and saw a photo of myself, reaching out to shake hands with an elderly woman, both of us smiling with a warmth that went far beyond just housing advocacy. Professor Keller sat down, poured herself some tea, and looked at me with that familiar, gentle gaze. "Lar, what do you think makes a home?" I thought for a moment, then answered. "A place you can walk into without needing to prove your worth, where you're trusted, seen, and allowed to be yourself." She nodded, said nothing more, but I knew. She was one of the first people who ever gave me that definition. That night, just as I was pouring water into a glass pitcher in my apartment, the doorbell rang. I figured it was a neighbor, but when I opened the door, standing in front of me was Natalie. The nursing student from last year who once told me about being evicted from her dorm due to a misunderstanding. Now, Natalie was a part-time staff member at Havenlink and had just received a scholarship to pursue her master's in public policy. She smiled, holding a bouquet of white tulips. "You can't just let me have a private graduation ceremony without inviting the person who pulled me out of my darkest time, right?" I stood still for a second, then wrapped her in a hug. No words needed. People like Natalie, Elaine, and Professor Keller, they were living proof of something I only truly understood now. Family isn't where you're born, it's where you get to be reborn, as someone chosen, loved, and seen. I once believed I'd been discarded, but the truth is, I was set free. Freed from a place where love had to be earned through silence, obedience, and carrying the weight of others' fractures. I don't deny what happened. I don't erase memories, and I don't rewrite history. But I no longer let that history define my worth today. At the end of the month, Havenlink hosted its largest seminar since our founding. Nearly 200 people attended. Students, nonprofits, local officials, and leaders in community law. As I stood on stage, looking out at the attentive faces in the audience, I didn't think of my parents. I didn't think of the house we used to live in. I thought of that first moment I opened the black trash bag on the porch, saw the old book, the cracked photo frame, and the scarf Mom knit me when I was 16. And I knew I had come far enough to understand that what I was looking for was never in that house. As I finished my speech, I ended with one simple but sincere thought. I used to believe blood ties were irreplaceable, but I've learned that sometimes the people who aren't related to you treat you like family, and sometimes the ones who are leave when you need them most. Then I paused, smiling. Real family is made of the people you choose, and who choose you, not out of obligation, but out of humanity. The room erupted in applause, but I didn't really hear it. Because in that moment, what filled my heart was a peace I had never known before. And I knew, no matter where life takes me, I will carry that flame with me. The flame of someone who was once left behind, but found her way back to herself and lit the way forward. Laura's story is a powerful reminder that not everyone born under the same roof deserves a permanent place in our hearts. Sometimes betrayal from those closest to us becomes the spark that pushes us to grow stronger and redefine our worth. Family isn't just where we come from, it's where we are seen and loved the way we deserve. Laura rewrote her story through resilience and courage, and that's something no one can ever take away. What are your thoughts on Laura's journey and the choices she made? Is family truly the safest place to fall? Share your reflections in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and finding your own way. That afternoon, I was wrapping up my final meeting with a client at the law firm in downtown Chicago when my phone rang. The screen showed an unfamiliar number, but it was from a bank. I frowned and answered. Hello, this is Brad Coleman from Horizon First Bank. I need to verify some information related to a mortgage loan for a property at 720 Glenwood Drive. I blinked. Glenwood Drive? I didn't own any property there. You must have the wrong person, I replied politely. I don't have any loans tied to that address. I understand your surprise, the man said, his voice lowering slightly with hesitation. But your name, Emma Carter, is listed as a co-signer on a mortgage application under the primary applicant, Madison Carter, your sister. I froze. The pen slipped from my hand and hit the desk. That's impossible. I've never signed anything related to my sister's loan. I understand, but the loan was approved 7 months ago. All documents carry your signature. Your parents brought the paperwork to the branch themselves. I held my breath. A rush of images flashed through my mind. My mother's avoiding gaze during Christmas dinner. The awkward silence every time I mentioned Madison's new house. And especially when they handed me a few health insurance forms at Dad's birthday party, saying I just needed to sign because it was time for renewal. I tried to steady my voice. I need a copy of all the documents, immediately. I'll email them in the next few minutes, Brad replied. But there's another issue. The payments are more than 2 months overdue. The current balance is around $17,800.00. My chest tightened. I couldn't even register the rest of what Brad was saying. Once the call ended, I dialed Alex, my best friend since college, also a civil attorney, and the only person I knew who wouldn't judge me for saying something this insane. They forged my signature, I blurted when he picked up. Madison, my parents, all of them. Alex didn't ask a single question. I'll be there in 15 minutes. When Alex arrived, I had already received Brad's email. We opened the PDF file, and in an instant, every suspicion turned into pure anger. The signature line on the mortgage declaration didn't just resemble mine. It had the same little loop at the end of the A in Emma, just like my mother's handwriting. Alex tapped the screen. They didn't even bother to make it a perfect match. This is a serious offense. I nodded. My hands were shaking when my phone lit up. My mom was calling. I handed the phone to Alex, who gestured, "Answer it. Try to stay calm." I took a deep breath and accepted the call. "Hi, Mom." "Sweetheart, are you free tonight? Your dad's making your favorite spaghetti and meatballs." I almost laughed at the irony. Perfect, because I wanted to talk to you too. About a very interesting call I got from Horizon Bank. There was silence on the other end. Then she spoke, her voice stammering. "I was going to tell you soon, really. It's just... Madison needed help, and you're doing so well." "So your solution was to forge my signature? Do you realize this could cost me my job, my law license?" "You're overreacting, Emma. We're family. Families help each other." I clenched my jaw, fighting to stay composed. "Help each other? Or just help Madison? You put me in nearly $18,000, 0 cents of debt, and didn't say a word. Madison will pay it back. She just needs time." I cut her off, staring at the computer screen showing 3 overdue payments. "I'm coming over tonight. Madison better be there too. We need to talk. Clearly." I ended the call, still shaking. Alex closed the laptop. "Do you want to press charges?" I sank into my chair, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. "I don't know," I whispered, "but I need the truth. All of it." Alex placed a hand on my shoulder. "Then we start tonight." I nodded, something shifting inside me, not pain, but resolve. My family wanted to use my success as a shield for their bad decisions. Fine. Now they'll learn what it's like to face a lawyer. Alex returned to my office at 8 p.m., carrying his laptop, a bag of sandwiches, and a look more serious than I'd ever seen. "You need to eat something before you lose it," he said, setting the food down and pulling up a chair. "I've started digging into the bank and 3 other financial companies. This is not just a mortgage." I stared at his screen as files began to pop up. My name, my personal email, my social security number. "Emma," he said quietly, "there are 3 credit cards in your name, opened in less than 6 months. The combined credit limit is almost $70,000, 0 cents, and they're all maxed out." I collapsed into the chair, my heart pounding. "No way. I've only ever applied for 1 card, my Amex from 2019. "And that's just the surface," Alex said, flipping to another screen. "There's also an unsecured personal loan for $50,000, 0 cents, from a finance company in Iowa, disbursed 4 months ago. And worse, an investment account in your name was used as collateral for a business loan." I jumped up. "What? I don't own a business?" "You don't need to," Alex said calmly. "They just needed paperwork and a signature, which they've gotten very good at faking." I paced across the office, mind racing. 7 months. For 7 months, I had lived, worked, and believed my financial life was secure. And in that time, the people closest to me had used my identity as a shield for their debt. "Your credit score has tanked," Alex added. "When was the last time you checked?" "About 6 months ago," I answered. "It was 812. It's 613 now." I slumped back in the chair, completely drained. My career, Alex, if the firm finds out, they'll start asking questions. If there's an investigation, I could be implicated, just for being the account holder. "That's why we need to act fast," he said seriously. "I've already contacted Nora, a financial fraud expert at our main office. She's agreed to help, but needs every single document." "How much more do you think I don't know?" I asked, my throat tight. "Hard to say," Alex shook his head. "If they forged a signature for a mortgage, there's nothing stopping them from using your identity for investments, more credit, even tax filings." My phone rang. It was Madison. I didn't answer. "We'll take it step by step," Alex said, pulling out a folder. "First, you need to contact the 3 credit bureaus to freeze your report. Then we'll file fraud reports with every institution that opened accounts in your name without consent." I nodded, still dizzy. "What's the total?" "Estimated damages so far, about $292,000. 0 cents. Could be more if we find other hidden accounts." It felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. Nearly $300,000, 0 cents. Not because I made bad choices or overspent, but because my own family decided I could handle it. "I need to know what else they're hiding," I whispered. "If I'm the target, who knows what else they've done?" Alex nodded. "I'll coordinate with Nora. I think you should also bring in an independent legal analyst to review all transactions on your accounts." A thought struck me. Wait. Mom borrowed my laptop twice last month, said she needed to check email. And Madison, she came to my office on my birthday and stayed late. She could have seen account info. Alex opened his laptop, accessed my remote login history. A few seconds later, he turned the screen toward me. "There's an unauthorized login from your mom's home IP right after Madison's visit." "So that's it," I said, voice hollow. "They didn't just take advantage of me. They planned it." Alex paused. "What do you want to do next?" I looked at him. The answer was clear. No turning back. Tomorrow night, I'll confront them, but not as family. I'm going to let them know I know everything. And this time, I'm not going alone. I stepped into the suburban house my parents had lived in for over 20 years, feeling like a stranger. Everything looked just as it did on Thanksgiving. The worn carpet, the family portrait in the living room, and the familiar scent of roast chicken Mom always made when she was hiding something. Madison sat at the dining table, eyes puffy. My dad stood near the stove, back turned, saying nothing. My mom looked up from the couch with a forced smile. "Emma, you're here," she said, like nothing had happened. I didn't respond. I placed a thick stack of documents on the table, printed from Alex's files. Let's not pretend. These are copies of every credit account, loan, and investment fraudulently opened in my name. Mom glanced quickly at the file, then looked away. Madison broke down in tears. "You don't understand," she stammered. "I didn't mean to, I just needed a little help with the down payment for the house, and then things got out of control." "Didn't mean to?" I cut her off, my voice cold. "Madison, you used my credit score to take out a $180,000 0-cents loan. You went shopping with credit cards in my name, and you used my investment account as collateral for your own loan. You call that a little help?" That's when my dad finally spoke, his voice low and tired. "She just needed a start. And you already have everything, Emma. A career, money, a reputation. Madison just needed a chance." I stared at him. "So you both thought forging my signature and using my identity as a financial tool was reasonable?" My mom stood up and stepped closer. "We're family, Emma. I know this was wrong, but I believed you would understand. I believed you'd forgive us." I stepped back half a pace. "Forgiveness is not on my to-do list today." Madison grabbed my arm, tears streaming down her face. "I'll pay it back, I promise. I just need time." I pulled out my phone and opened a photo of her credit card statement. "Last month, you spent nearly $9,000, 0 cents at a spa, and $3.50 on designer handbags. How exactly do you plan to pay that back? How much do you earn per month?" Silence. The question sliced through the living room like a blade. "I don't know," Madison admitted, her voice so soft I had to tilt my head to hear. "I don't have a steady job." I nodded. "Then, I'm sorry, but you can't pay it back. And if you both truly believe that love is enough reason to destroy my credit, career, and reputation, then maybe we're not even speaking the same language anymore." My mom burst into tears. "Emma, please, don't do this. Your sister, she'll lose her house." I looked at Madison, now trembling like a child caught red-handed. Then I looked back at my parents, the same people who once taught me that honesty was a core value, now standing there hoping I'd just look the other way. "I've contacted a lawyer," I said slowly. "Tomorrow morning, I'm filing an identity fraud complaint with the State Financial Crimes Unit." My dad scowled. "You're really going to take your own family to court?" "I'm not taking anyone anywhere," I replied. "You brought this on yourselves when you chose to exploit me without asking." Madison whispered, "You can't do this. I'm your sister." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "You are my sister, but you're also the person who wrecked the career I spent a decade building. You don't get to steal everything from someone and then ask them to smile and forgive you." My mom collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. My dad stayed silent. Madison could only stare at me, panic in her eyes. I walked toward the door and turned back one last time. "I'm not doing this out of anger. I'm doing it for justice, because if I stay quiet now, there will be a next time. And another after that, until there's nothing left for me to protect." I closed the door behind me, leaving behind the tears, the betrayal, and the endlessly repeated excuse, "We're family." Because for the first time in my life, I realized family is not a license to hurt someone and call it love. 3 days after confronting my family, I was sitting in the office of Solstice James, a senior financial advisor at the law firm I was working with. Alex had made the introduction, and within 5 minutes of meeting her, I knew why. Solstice didn't say much. She simply studied each data line, typing with precision as if decoding a cursed treasure map. I sat beside her, cold sweat soaking the back of my shirt, as I watched the screen fill with numbers and account names I had never seen before. "Emma, she finally said, almost 2 hours into tracing the transactions. We have a much bigger problem than you think. I looked up. How big? Big enough to call the FBI. I held my breath. Solstice turned the screen toward me. I've been tracking a series of suspicious transactions from your investment account, used as collateral for a so-called private investment fund named Riverpine Growth Fund. Ring any bells? I shook my head. Exactly. It doesn't exist, but several members of the Windmere Golf Club, where your parents are regulars, have invested in it. She pulled up a spreadsheet. I traced the flow of funds. A total of $5,200,000, 0 cents, passed through at least 4 intermediary accounts. 2 in the US, 1 in Belize, and 1 anonymous account in Luxembourg. Oh my God. I pushed my chair back, struggling to breathe. It doesn't stop there, Solstice continued. They used your financial records and reputation, including a copy of your real investment portfolio, to convince others to contribute. Your name, your photo, your investment account, even fake email exchanges showing you as the fund manager. What, they faked my email? They created one nearly identical, e.carter.consult@gmail.com. They also replicated your e-signature. I suspect there's a keylogger installed on your office computer, or a shared device. I dropped my head into my hands, my heart racing. So, they didn't just scam me. They used me to scam others? Exactly. These people believed they were investing in a fund run by a successful young attorney. They trusted your personal profile, your perfect credit score, your job title. It was a sophisticated setup. Just then, Alex walked in with a coffee and a look of barely concealed tension. I got a message from a bank employee. Emma's father and a friend just tried to withdraw $200,000, 0 cents, from a joint account, but the system flagged it and froze the transaction. Good, Solstice nodded. We need to stop them before the money disappears completely. I still couldn't catch my breath. What about the victims? Has anyone come forward yet? Not yet, Solstice said. They're all older, well-respected, and reluctant to admit they were fooled. Some are old friends of your parents. Others were your mom's college classmates. I was stunned. The people who trusted my family most were the ones being hurt the worst. There's someone you need to meet, Solstice said, stepping out briefly. She returned moments later with a woman whose neatly styled gray hair and beige coat I recognized instantly. Mrs. Helen Ward, my former high school teacher and my mother's longtime friend. Hello, Emma, she said softly. She said I could trust you. I stood and shook her hand. I'm so sorry. If I had known sooner. She shook her head, eyes misty. I believed in your mother, in your image. Young, successful, financially savvy. They said you ran the fund. I withdrew my entire retirement savings. My throat tightened. I'll do everything I can to recover that money, I promised. I swear. Alex nodded. We've prepared a full case file. We'll submit it to the Federal Investigation Office in the morning, Solstice added. We're also compiling a complete list of victims. Once the case is launched, they'll receive protection and legal support. I looked at the whiteboard on the wall, covered in sticky notes with victim names, dollar amounts, and transaction dates. It looked like the blueprint of a massive fraud scheme, with my name right in the middle. How much time do we have? I asked. Not much, Alex replied. They're panicking. Wait too long and the money could vanish into other banking systems, beyond our reach. I clenched my fists. Then we start now. That morning, I walked into the Hallridge Bank headquarters with Alex and Solstice, carrying a thick file filled with forged emails, financial statements, IP access logs, and a verified list of fraudulent investments. Frank Delaney, the branch manager, stood up when he saw us, a flicker of surprise and tension crossing his face. Emma? I just met with your parents earlier today, he said, trying to maintain a neutral tone. They claim you're trying to tarnish the family's reputation and even threatened to sue you for defamation. I placed the file on his desk and looked him straight in the eye. Then I suggest you take a look at what I brought with me today. Frank sat down, opening the documents, reading each page slowly. The calm in his eyes gradually gave way to concern, especially as he reviewed Solstice's analysis of the suspicious transactions, specifically the money trail from the Riverpine Growth Fund to anonymous offshore accounts. "Oh my God," he exhaled as he reached the IP address report. "All mortgage applications, investment activity, and credit card openings were executed from the same location, your parents' home." Solstice nodded. "We also extracted device identification logs. All actions originated from a personal laptop that matches the one Madison brought with her to Emma's office." Frank closed the folder, his face now stiff as stone. "I'll have to escalate this to our internal legal team immediately. The bank will need to freeze all related accounts pending investigation. We've already sent the same report to the Northridge County Police Department and the Federal Financial Crimes Office," Alex added. "Officers should arrive shortly." Less than an hour later, 2 plainclothes officers entered the bank. I recognized them from an earlier meeting, Inspector Hope and Deputy Inspector Morales. "Miss Carter, thank you for cooperating. We've reviewed the evidence. It's time to bring in the parties involved." I waited in the back conference room as Frank called my parents and Madison, asking them to return to the bank to clarify some information regarding the mortgage paperwork. All 3 agreed immediately, probably still thinking they were ahead of the game. When they entered the room, my mother was the first to speak, her voice casual like walking into a cocktail party. "Frank, I'm so glad you called. We thought it best to clear things up with Emma as soon as possible." My father gave me a curt nod. Madison wouldn't meet my eyes. "Clear things up." "Exactly," I said, pushing the file across the table. "Please review this. It contains evidence of identity theft, fraud, financial manipulation, and violations of federal law." A frozen silence fell over the room. Madison trembled, eyes wide. My mother snatched the file and flipped through it frantically. My father's face turned red, his hand tightening into a fist. "Emma," he growled, "what do you think you're doing?" "I'm stopping the 3 of you from continuing to ruin my life and the lives of at least 14 other people," I replied. "You called it helping family. I call it what it is. Organized crime." My mother slammed her hand on the table. "You're going to put your entire family in jail over a few mistakes? Madison is your sister." "No," I said, locking eyes with her. "I'm bringing criminals to justice, no matter what last name they have." At that moment, the 2 officers stepped forward, flashing their badges. "Gordon Carter, Helen Carter, Madison Carter, you are being placed under arrest under a summons from the Federal Financial Court for charges of fraud, financial crimes, identity theft, and operating an unlicensed investment scheme." My mother's jaw dropped. This is a mistake. We're the victims. She made this up." Madison broke down in tears. "I didn't know anything about those offshore accounts. I just helped Mom and Dad convince a few friends to invest." My father tried to stand, but Morales stepped in. "Sir, we advise you remain silent. Anything you say now may be used as evidence in court." As they were led out of the room, my mother looked back at me, eyes filled with fury. "You'll regret this, Emma. Families don't do this to each other." I said nothing. I simply watched until the 3 of them disappeared behind the glass door. My heart no longer felt heavy. Alex stepped beside me. "You okay?" "Not quite, but I'm on the right path." I opened my phone to find messages from several victims, people I once called family friends, thanking me for standing up for the truth. Federal Courtroom 4 in Chicago was packed on the day my family's trial officially began. I sat in the front row, among legal representatives and witnesses, clutching my statement folder, my heart pounding like it no longer belonged to me. Across the room, my father, Gordon Carter, sat in an old gray suit, looking more worn than I had ever seen. My mother, Helen Carter sat quietly beside him, occasionally glancing at me with pleading eyes. And Madison, my sister, looked like a faded shadow, pale and hollow-eyed, lips dry, gaze fixed downward. Judge Roberts opened the trial with a commanding tone. The defense attorneys leaned on familiar tropes: unintentional, family pressure, financial hardship. But when Prosecutor Whitaker stood up, their narrative began to unravel. "We intend to prove these actions were not the result of ignorance, but of a deliberate, organized scheme," he said. The defendants didn't just defraud elderly victims, they weaponized their daughter's identity and reputation to fabricate credibility. I was called to the stand shortly after opening statements. My steps felt heavy, but when I looked at the front row, where Miss Ward and 4 other victims sat, I knew I couldn't falter. "My name is Emma Carter," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm a corporate attorney at Rothman & Lindley. Within less than a year, I discovered my identity had been used to open 3 credit cards, 2 loans, and a fake investment account under my name. I presented every piece of evidence, every forged email, every IP trace from my parents' house, every call I'd received from banks when my account was used as collateral. I wasn't just betrayed," I said, locking eyes with Madison. "I was turned into a shield for criminal behavior. My family used my success to lure others into investing in a non-existent fund." The prosecution presented bank statements, victim testimonies, and, notably, social media photos. My mother in designer dresses on a yacht, my father posing at a golf course in Florida, taken at the exact times large withdrawals were made from victims' accounts. Gasps echoed in the courtroom as Ms. Ward explained she had invested solely because she believed I was managing the fund. Madison's lawyer argued she should be treated separately from the case, claiming she only followed her parents' instructions. But when the prosecution showed she had submitted a job application using my resume, complete with my law degree, e-signature, and bar license number, no one doubted her involvement. The judge flipped through the case files for nearly an hour before looking up. "Based on the evidence presented, the testimony of the victims, and charges from the federal prosecutor's office, the court hereby sentences." The room was so tense I could hear the sound of a stapler clicking from the clerk's desk. "Gordon Carter, 18 years in federal prison with no parole for the first 10 years. Helen Carter, 15 years in federal prison. Madison Carter, 12 years in federal prison and permanent disqualification from all financial representation or practice." Madison broke down crying on the spot. My mother slumped into her chair, her face pale. My father said nothing, staring straight ahead, his eyes hollow. "All assets connected to the case, including real estate, vehicles, jewelry, and domestic bank accounts, will be seized as restitution for the victims," the judge continued. "The court also orders the recovery of funds held in international banks, in cooperation with the FBI." I felt Mrs. Ward gently take my hand. "You did the right thing," she whispered. I wanted to believe that, but a part of me still ached. Because doing the right thing also meant losing my family. As the police led the 3 of them out of the courtroom, Madison turned back, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know it would go this far." I didn't respond, because I knew she did know. They all did. And they kept going, even when the cliff's edge was in sight. The trial ended, but my journey, for justice, for truth, and for the victims, was just beginning. 1 week after the trial, I returned to Rothman & Lindley with a completely different mindset. I was no longer Emma Carter, the daughter trying to uphold her family's honor. I came back as a survivor of an earthquake called betrayed trust, and I knew I wasn't alone. Less than 2 days after the sentencing, I received an email from the board of directors. They invited me to lead a new initiative called Reclaim and Rise, a legal and emotional support program for victims of financial fraud, committed by family members. "We believe no one is more qualified than you," the CEO wrote, "not just because of your expertise, but because you've lived it. You understand the pain, and you've turned it into purpose." I stared at that email for hours, torn. Part of me wanted to shut that chapter for good, to lock it away in the past. But the braver part of me knew this wasn't an end. It was a beginning. I said yes. In my first week as director, I barely slept. Together with Solstice and Alex, we began laying the foundation for the program. A hotline was launched, a website went live within 10 days, and within a week, over 300 people had reached out. Mostly middle-aged women, elderly individuals, or people who had been betrayed by someone they trusted. One of the first calls that shook me came from a 67-year-old woman named Marlene. "I borrowed my entire retirement fund to help my son start a business," she said over the phone. "Now he's gone. No money, no home, and I feel stupid." I sat in my office, clutching the phone, my voice catching. No one is stupid for trusting someone they love, but having the courage to rise after betrayal, that's extraordinary. At the same time, I decided to do something I had been avoiding for months: cleaning out my parents' old apartment. After their assets were seized for restitution, the remainder had been turned over to local authorities. They gave me the right to retrieve any personal items unrelated to the case. Walking into the house I grew up in, it felt like time had frozen. The wooden clock my mother used to polish weekly was still there. The family photos on the walls, their fake smiles now gave me chills. I stepped into my old bedroom and searched through Madison's dresser drawers, only to find a worn leather notebook, brittle with age. On the first page, in her handwriting, were the words, "Riverpine Plan, don't let Emma find out." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, not in anger, but to let go. That evening, I held the first support group meeting in a small hall sponsored by the firm. I had prepared a speech, but as I looked around at the weathered faces in the room, faces that had once known fear, confusion, and now showed hope, I folded the paper in front of me. "I'm not here to tell anyone how to heal," I said slowly. "I'm here because I once sat exactly where you are now. I once believed that family was the safest place, until they crossed every line I thought couldn't be crossed." The room went still. Then a young woman named Lindsay stood up, tears falling. "Thank you for saying what I never dared to admit." After that meeting, I received dozens of messages, handwritten notes, even small gifts. Not out of gratitude, but because they no longer felt alone. I no longer had a mother, a father, or a sister in the true sense of the word. But I had found a new kind of family, one that didn't demand perfection, only honesty and compassion. One autumn afternoon, I sat on a bench near the office, watching sunlight filter through the leaves. Solstice arrived, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Emma, do you think you'll ever forgive them?" she asked gently. I thought for a moment, then smiled. I don't know if forgiveness even matters anymore. But I know this: I've forgiven myself. For staying silent, for enduring it, for believing that if I were just good enough, they wouldn't do what they did. Solstice nodded. "And now?" I looked toward the skyline, where so many people were trying to rebuild their lives. "Now, I use my voice to protect the ones who never had a chance. That's how I begin again. That's how I choose to go on." That evening, I stood alone in the auditorium where Reclaim and Rise held its first conference. The room was empty, the chairs stacked, warm golden lights glowing on the stage, where I had just shared my story with hundreds of others. People who had also been betrayed by family. On a small table in the corner sat dozens of handwritten notes, messages left behind by attendees. One of them read, "I used to think I was weak for not being able to forgive, but thanks to you, I see now. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is cut off what's toxic." I held the note, feeling the shaky words as if they were part of me. For years, I had fooled myself into believing that love meant enduring, that preserving the image of family was sacred. But now I understand. Real strength doesn't lie in quietly absorbing pain. It lies in speaking up, in protecting ourselves and others from the cycle of abuse and lies. I used to be the daughter who tried to please everyone, who thought that if I worked harder, was kinder, more successful, my family would truly love me. But the truth is, love is not something you earn by trying harder. It's given freely, with respect and presence. And if it doesn't come with those things, it's not love. It's possession. I remembered the day I stood in court, testifying in front of the 3 people I once thought were my anchors. In that moment, it wasn't just pain in my heart. It was a quiet resolve. Never let anyone else go through this without someone in their corner. Since then, I've met hundreds of people. A single mother betrayed by her own brother who took out a loan in her name and disappeared. An elderly man living on disability whose daughter used his name to buy a luxury car. A young college student burdened with debt after his parents used his identity to apply for a loan for his younger sibling's tuition. Different stories, same heartbreak. The betrayal of someone you once loved without question. And I began to realize, sometimes we have to redefine the word family. Family isn't blood. It's not about shared names or shared roofs. Family is where you're safe from exploitation, where trust is honored, not abused, where you don't have to prove your worth to be loved. I looked up at the banner hanging behind the stage, the program's motto in bold white letters: "Justice begins with truth." Alex stepped in through the side door, carrying 2 cups of hot tea. He handed me one and sat down in the chair beside me. "You did great today," he said. "Not just for what you shared, but for how you made people feel like they're not alone anymore." I smiled. "I just don't want anyone going through this to feel weak or wrong for choosing to walk away." "Your old family." Alex hesitated. "Do you ever think about forgiving them?" I looked out the window, where the sunset was slowly fading. "I don't hold on to hatred," I replied. "But forgiveness doesn't mean letting them back in. Forgiveness is for peace of mind, not a second chance for them." Alex nodded. "I get that." I turned to him, my eyes steady. "I'm no longer chasing love from people who hurt me. I'm building a new kind of family. One made of people who listen, who respect, who care. People like you, like Solstice, like everyone who stood up today and told their story." I raised my cup of tea. To truth, to courage, and to a new definition of family. Alex clinked his cup against mine. "To the new beginnings we choose." And as night gently settled outside, I knew my life was no longer tied to the past. I had lost a family, but I found myself. And from that, I began to rewrite what family meant. With my own hands. Emma's story is a powerful reminder that family doesn't always mean safety or love. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from those closest to us. But Emma proved that true strength lies not in staying silent to protect a false image, but in standing up, choosing truth, and protecting herself and others from harm. She not only reclaimed her dignity, but turned her pain into purpose, helping others step out of the shadows. What do you think about Emma's journey and her brave choices? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more raw, heartfelt, and inspiring family stories.